I'm Markku Wilenius, and I have this question. When Putin challenged the world, what does the world actually do? I'm sure I'm not the only one here to think about that. How is it possible that Putin has put his soldiers to bomb Ukraine and its infrastructure to the point that everything is going down in the drain? Infrastructure, energy infrastructure already destroyed quite big parts of it. Then there are other things. But the ultimate question is that we see this happening and we just mostly rant about it. But we are not really taking much of the action. And we can see that at this point, Ukraine cannot help but see that the cities and infrastructures are being bombed. Even with the help that comes from the West, they cannot really defend themselves. And this is happening at the time when we are living in an era where Europe has unified for the most part, and when there is also a strong coalition with United States. So the real big question is that why is it so that European Union, even all things and all aid that the Union has put forward, can do actually very little? Why is it so that United Nations is practically doing nothing to prevent this destruction to happen? And why is it so that even G20 seems to be totally incapable of doing anything? We just saw recently with a meeting that the foreign minister of Russia basically were just accusing the West, when of course the real point is that how on earth do we allow a nation invade to another independent nation? Why don't we prevent this to happen? What is wrong with our system? I think that there is only one answer, real answer. And I think that has to do with our values. I think we in the West have become hopelessly self-interest materialists. We are just looking for our own good, and we really cannot reach out. This obsession to the self-interest, which in this case means that we only take care of our national interest, defines our response, even in this extreme case. So what does this tell about the humanity? It tells that we are almost unable to feel empathy, to experience solidarity. We're just locked into our self-interest, which actually means that we are not really advanced as a humanity, I'm afraid to say. We are quite on the low level of performance when it comes to the question that what could we do? How could we express our empathy? How could we express our solidarity? There is so much more than we could do, but currently we don't do it. What is it that we need to be doing so that this would never happen again? I think what we need in the world is a real world government. The government that would be 1,000, if not million times more effective to execute action when there is a need for that. Wouldn't waste its time for useless voting when we need action. If one country invades to another independent country, this world government should be able to cut all the economic ties and thus make sure that the impact of that type of the deed that the one country does to another could just not continue. And there are also, of course, many other thinkable ways how we can actually prevent things from happening. But of course, this type of world government we just don't have at the moment. But in the future, it's pretty obvious we need to have that. Secondly, we also need to have a much more tight coalition of democratic countries, kind of a moral community that looks after the rule of law, whether it's a national or international rule of law, and make sure if there is a breach somewhere, there is a strong coalition of democratic countries against it. Again, if you look at the current situation, you would expect that countries like Germany, France, and Italy, strong democracies, would have had a common voice as to how to deal with this highly unexpected situation. But as we know, we have not seen much happening on that front. It's very much missing. But for the future, we definitely need that, because it's not an accident that truly democratic countries never invade other countries. There is always, at least in the modern times, there's always an authoritarian regime who does such things. But truly democratic countries simply don't do that. At the moment, Putin and his cronies are desperate. They are desperate because they just simply cannot afford to lose the war that they have started. They will have no future in that type of a situation. And this is exactly why, as almost as a last means, they try to bomb Ukraine now back to the Stone Age. But actually history proves that you never win the war with that measure. You just don't do that. In the end, we will see that's destruction without any meaning, even for Putin. Of course, earlier, Putin was putting forward another measure, which was nuclear warheads. He was threatening, actually, Ukraine to use that. But I guess Chinese leader Xi Jinping uttered very clearly lately that he just don't want that to happen. And I think he can tell this to Putin, and Putin will never even consider that. If the West had been more generous for Ukraine, giving more support, more up-to-date weaponry, this phase of bombing the civilian Ukraine would have never happened. The West had the strategy of too little and too late. And this is the result, a terrible destruction. At least we should have learned from this something. We cannot wait. We cannot just revert to our own self-interest. We need to see the bigger picture. Even those measures that we do, well, they help a little bit, but they don't really solve anything. So there is a real lesson here to be learned. In the same way that I believe we have learned quite a lot from the pandemic. These crises are always opportunities to learn. And in this case, I would particularly say that when it comes to us as human beings, we need to see ourselves growing, becoming bigger, becoming more refined, becoming more human beings, capable of feeling solidarity and empathy. And when we get to that stage, these types of events will not happen anymore. And also, we would have in place the type of the system that would be far ahead of preventing anything like this to happen. So let's hope that this is the very last time that we see these terrible events taking place in the world. I would like to hear your opinion about what would be the type of a system that you would like to see in place to prevent this type of events to happen. Please give me your response. Subscribe to my channel. You'll learn more about the future.